This is a Thor News presentation. Thor News presents Comet C2012 S1 ISON and WTF
Earth.
Seriously, bro.
Part 32. MABUS and the undebunkable doom. This episode is going to be filled with wild speculation, mystical educated guesses, and hard facts of fiscal and monetary physics, which provide undebunkable doom for all you doom junkies. Well, about 3 years ago, in correlation, about the time ladies stopped being interested in me, I got OCD about reading and trying to figure out Nostradamus' quatrains. I do not recommend this to anybody. It is like induced madness. Though Nostradamus is a great poet and a great writer, he's a downer, total downer. And like many people, I tried to figure out the MABUS riddle. Okay, to kind of understand how I drew my conclusion, and remember I drew my MABUS conclusion long before I'd heard of even Comet ISON. But the 3 quatrains we will go over, I think will begin to explain how I got to where I did. Step 1, quatrain 962. To the great one of Sarum Angora, Sodom and Gomorrah, the Crusaders will all be attached by rank. The long-lasting Hopium and Mandrake, the dragon, will be released on the 3rd of October. If we kick on over to Wikipedia, we will see that the Emergency Economic Stabilization Act of 2008 was enacted on the 3rd of October 2008. It is commonly referred to as the bailout of the U.S. financial system and the bailout of the banks, where Hank Paulson started off spending $700 billion to purchase distressed assets, especially mortgage-backed securities, and supplied cash directly to the banks. Alright, so in here it kind of implies that the stock markets are the beast spoken of in the Bible. Alright, cool. Step 2. Just before the deviant king is killed, Castor and Pollux in ship Comet, the public treasury emptied by land and sea. Well, alright, we got Comet ISON passing through Castor and Pollux. The national debt is 16.9 trillion, 20.6 if you add the Federal Reserve's debt. And then the third piece, MABUS then will soon die. There will come a horrible undoing of people and animals. At one vengeance, one will see vengeance. 100 hands, thirst, famine, when the comet will run. Alright, so yeah, there are the 3 pieces we had leading up to the identity of MABUS. And a lot of people have guessed in the past, like MABUS was Obama, MABUS was Bush, MABUS was Saddam Hussein, MABUS was Osama bin Laden, or even like, MABUS is Ray MABUS of the Navy. But no, MABUS is more powerful than all of them, in my opinion. MABUS is usually presented as kind of like a bad guy who will bring down everything into a period of lawlessness. And well, about 2 years ago, I figured out who MABUS was. Now, this is only my guess, and I could be totally wrong, but we shall see. Now, if you take the name MABUS, M-A-B-U-S, take the names Bush and Obama. The last 2 letters of Obama's name are M-A, and the first 3 letters of Bush's last name are B-U-S. Put them together, you get MABUS. Alright, that is step 1. Step 2. What is the major connection of a single person that Barack Obama and George W. Bush shared? Presidents 43 and 44. And that answer is, so our MABUS is Bernanke, the head of the Federal Reserve, the most powerful man on the whole planet. George W. Bush appointed him to the head of the Federal Reserve, and even though Barack Obama campaigned and promised totally different fiscal and monetary policy, he reappointed Bernanke to the head of the Federal Reserve. And I dare say that Bernanke is definitely way more powerful than Bush or Obama. I don't know if you guys follow the economy or economics at all, but in 2009, after George W. Bush, Hank Paulson, Bernanke, Tim Geithner told the world the only way to save Wall Street was to give them a blank check, and that blank check had a name, quantitative easing. So since 2009, we've gone through quantitative easing 1, quantitative easing 2, quantitative easing 3, then they got tired of numbering stuff, so they came out with quantitative easing forever, which would pump $85 billion into the stock markets through purchasing treasuries and mortgage-backed securities. Remember, mortgage-backed securities are those toxic assets which brought down the entire system pretty much. What it is they took A mortgage-backed security is when they take the debt of a house. Like, let's say your house costs $100,000. They take that $100,000 debt and they chop it up into 2,000 pieces. And then they take a little piece out of it and they shove it in a mortgage-backed security, so that a mortgage-backed security is filled with like 1,000,000 pieces of the debt of houses. And then they repackage it, and through a supercomputer, they show it to be profitable over a like 10 to 20 years span. And guess what? Those things are failing and have been failing like crazy. So to keep it from going under, they are basically having to buy the mortgage-backed securities up so that everything doesn't fail. So yesterday when Bernanke announced, shocking everybody but me, that they would not stop or even taper quantitative easing, they could not afford to even lessen pumping $85 billion into the stock markets, even though the stock markets are at all-time highs. I was like, hey, okay, I guess it's time. I'll say it. And that is why I've always coordinated Comet ISON with economics. The closer ISON get, the faster they print. Now, ISON could still be one of the many distractions to distract us from the fact that we have turned our entire country and our entire world over to the bankers. Or it could be that, they see something coming, whether or not it is or isn't ISON, and they're just trying to do what they can to prepare. So, I don't know, And I said undebunkable doom, you cannot keep interest rates at 0%, which means that allows banks, corporations, and hedge funds to borrow from the Federal Reserve at 0%. Then they can turn around, buy a treasury bill from the government, let's say 2% compounding. So that's like free money. You borrow $100 billion at 0%. You buy 5-year treasury bills, and you just made like free $36 billion, man. It is like the easiest money. If you can get it, if you can get to the Fed window, you're gold, asterisk. And if you will look, the funniest thing is, Ben Bernanke always says, man, we are going to keep pouring money into Wall Street until Main Street's unemployment improves. Which is like the dumbest thing I've ever heard, or the ultimate Joseph Goebbels propaganda. It's like that saying, the beatings will continue until morale improves. And so, during the time of quantitative easing, if you'll notice, it ticks down almost 1% over the last few years. Anybody knows that the unemployment rates are false. The way they count them are false. They don't count people who've fallen off the rolls. They don't count people who are no longer looking for work. They don't count people who've overextended their benefits. So even the idea that unemployment has been going down at all is pretty false. And if you will notice, in the time that quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4 have been going on, compare the effect it has had on unemployment and compare the effect that has had on the Dow Jones and the S&P stock market. Since quantitative easing, stock markets have been skyrocketing. Unemployment has been trickling down, and wages for the 95% and under have been flatlined since about 1990. So ask yourself, how long can you continue to print an unlimited amount of money? How long can you continue to let bank, hedge funds, and corporations borrow at 0%? How long can the central banking economy continue to exist? Anyway, there it is. I did it. I said it. This one is no fun. I apologize. And figured you guys were all old enough now to know the truth. I could be totally wrong about this. About Bernanke being MABUS. I'm not totally wrong about quantitative easing being bad for humans. Alright, so if MABUS dies, we know this is Nostradamus' Comet. And I'm going to do funny, silly videos for like the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 videos. I've done too many doomy ones in a row. I'm all doomed out. And if I'm doom saturated, I'm never going to get to kiss a pretty young lady again in my life. And I deserve it. I don't want to end up with like some weird pillow toy girlfriend or a robot girlfriend. I want the real thing. Right, God bless everybody. Be cool. And winter is coming. Stand strong. I love you. I want the real thing.